All right, folks, just to start off a couple of things, we are broadcasting live online right now, so if you can make sure to mute your cell phone, and the mic that's in the room is really sensitive, so if we can keep the side chatter and paper shuffling down to as minimal as possible, because our online audience, which is actually kind of large right now, is able to hear all of that. So just wanted to let you know that. So we'll get started. My name is Jeff Millard. I'm a policy associate here at Swords of Plowshares. I'm a Iraq combat veteran. I'm service-connected disabled. My service dog assistance you'll see floating around the room here. That I'll talk about her a little bit later in the presentation, but just wanted to introduce myself and her. Quickly, what we're going to go through today, we have two portions for today. The first is the part that's going to be broadcast, so we're live right now broadcasting. Hello, interwebs. This is our first live broadcast, so we're broadcasting and we have an audience room. First time we're doing this, so I appreciate you helping us work through some of our technical bugs on this. But we're going to, during the broadcast, we're going to do the cultural competency and the how to become a veteran-friendly company. And then after the broadcast is over, sorry folks online, those of us in the room will have a roundtable discussion and really try to get into some of the specifics of what you see day to day in your trying to hire veterans, what you're doing, what's working well, maybe help to get some suggestions on how we can improve hiring veterans and how we can improve making our companies veteran-friendly. Quick overview of Swords to Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares is one of, if not the most comprehensive veteran service organizations in the entire country. I'm a nationally recognized expert on veteran homelessness. I've worked on veteran homeless policy for almost 10 years now. And I chose to move from Washington, D.C. to the Bay so that I could work at Swords of Plowshares because, in my opinion, we are the best at what we do. And we have, like most homeless organizations, we obviously have housing programs. We have permanent supportive housing. We have transitional housing. We have new SSVF programs. We also have health and social services, employment and job training, obviously. We have programs just for women veterans. And the two things, in my opinion, that make us really stand out over other vet service organizations that are doing great grassroots service for veterans is the Institute for Veteran Policy, where I work, where we handle tackling veteran homelessness at a macro level from a policy standpoint, and then also the legal services for disabled veterans. So we have legal staff as well as a large pro bono program that helps veterans with things like discharge upgrade, as well as things like disability claims, compensation and pension claims. So let's start the cultural competency with this. In the military, there's actually 5 branches, right? Everybody knows the First Corps, right? Everybody knows the Army, the Navy, there's those pesky Marines, and the Air Force, right? But we always forget about usually these guys down here, the Coasties, right? Coast Guard is actually a branch of the military, but it functions in 2 capacities, right? The Coast Guard can belong to the Department of Defense in times of war, but it can also belong to the Department of Homeland Security and act within a law enforcement capacity. Quick example of that, I was in the New York Army National Guard on 9/11. My unit was the first unit to respond to what became known as Ground Zero. We secured the perimeter, worked with the NYPD and FBI in that process. And the Coast Guard was part of that mission as well. So the Coast Guard had to continue their mission in the Port of New York, and at the same time had to then transition and do a dual mission and also support combat operations in what, immediate aftermath of 9/11 became combat operations for surrounding New York and helping with our perimeter, things like that. So the Coasties actually had that dual mission right from 9/11. So keep in mind they're also part of the U.S. Armed Forces. All those branches, all 5 branches, have an active component, which is the people who do this 365 days a year. This is what they do. This is their job. They also have a reserve component, that 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year that we hear about. 2 of the branches also have a National Guard component. The Army and the Air Force both have a National Guard component. I was a member of the Army National Guard. The differences basically between the National Guard and the active duty, we're seeing kind of increased rates of some of the problem areas that we see with the National Guard, because largely the National Guard doesn't come home to that built-in community that an active duty base will, right? An active duty base, it's a community unto itself. It's a city unto itself. Has its own schools, has its own mall, has its own shops. All of this built right into an active duty base. And therefore, when someone comes back, they're coming back to a community that has it's almost like a buffer zone, right? So when someone's redeploying for Iraq or Afghanistan on active duty, that active duty base serves to meet a lot of the needs that when the National Guard Reservist comes home, sometimes aren't there. So we need to make sure we're spending special attention on National Guard Reservists coming home. Quick little keys and key lingo and some terms we'll go over real quick. The first is the Global War on Terror, GWAT. GWAT is basically, when we talk GWAT, we're usually talking Iraq, Afghanistan, but the reality is that when that word is thrown around, Global War on Terror, it truly is global. If you take a look at the map at the bottom of the slide, all of the red areas are actually missions for the Global War on Terror. And what you don't see on this map, what they don't include for some reason, is Antarctica. There's also a Global War on Terror mission happening in Antarctica. So I don't know what the penguins are up to, but if they're on flight, watch out, because apparently the penguins are trouble, and there's a mission happening with Global War on Terror down in Antarctica. So penguins on planes, watch out for that one. The other big one that you need to know is Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? Operation Iraqi Freedom was the combat operation in Iraq. It was actually originally Operation Iraqi Liberation. I actually have friends who have that on their orders, original orders, Operation Iraqi Liberation. And someone's coming on, hey guys, that spells oil. Maybe we shouldn't. So they changed it to Operation Iraqi Freedom from Operation Iraqi Liberation. It's actually a true story. When combat operations in Iraq ended, the mission became known as Operation New Dawn, or OND. They're also, now we're back, obviously, bombing Iraq and Syria, so there'll be another, probably 3-letter acronym that's going to come your way. So be prepared for that. There's a mission ongoing. The name is still classified, so we don't know exactly what that is, but that'll trickle out pretty soon here too. So just keep in mind there'll be another acronym coming your way. The last is Operation Enduring Freedom. Generally, when we talk OEF, we're talking about Afghanistan, but keep in mind that that also includes any of the missions that support the Afghanistan operation. So we're talking about Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. Most of the Middle East operations are counted under Operation Enduring Freedom. And one other thing on this, also Operation Enduring Freedom, we have now withdrawn combat troops from Afghanistan, so the combat mission is technically over. So expect another mission name for Afghanistan as well. Much like OIF turned into OND, OEF will change into something rather soon here. Again, that's still a classified name on the mission, so we don't know what it is, but the combat troops have left Afghanistan, so that's going to mean that there'll be a new mission name coming up as well. Iraq and Afghanistan veterans specifically. We spend a lot of time talking about Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. Why? Because we're going to be dealing with a lot of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, right? Especially in the state of California. California has the most deployed National Guard. It's one of the largest states in the country for returning veterans. We estimate that about 48,000 veterans will be returning to the state of California every 6 months for the next couple of years. All right? The military itself has a turnover rate of about 20 to 30% every year turnover within the military. So that means that those veterans are going someplace. They're largely going to California. And so we're going to have a lot of opportunity to be interacting with veterans, a lot of opportunity to employing veterans with really great skills and coming up and getting some of the top talent for companies. Quick thing about women veterans. We'll talk about women veterans for a moment. There's this kind of common misconception out there that women don't serve in combat, don't fight in combat. I want to be really clear on something. Women have always served in combat. What's changed recently is the combat exclusionary policy that kept women out of combat arms jobs. That's now gone. So the first women have completed infantry basic training. So now we have infantry women. For the first time in our history, we officially have women in our infantry units. The first group of women are right now going through the infantry officer course. We haven't had a woman graduate that course yet, but from what I understand, are women going through the course, doing wonderful at the course. So we're going to have infantry officers that are women very soon. That doesn't mean, though, again, that women haven't served in combat, because they always have. My favorite historical figure, one of my favorite historical figures, Harriet Tubman, is also a combat vet, right? One of the most decorated combat vets of the Civil War, Harriet Tubman. We've had women who dressed up as men and tried to sneak into the military to fight wars. We've had women who have fought in frontline combat since there has been combat. And so I really want us to recognize the fact that women are contributing in the front lines the same way as men are. A little breakdown of some of the diversity in the military. All right, this chart is broken up by gender, the orange being men, the blue being women, and we'll see. So it's just some of the breakdowns of the demographics of what we're dealing with, right? Just let you take a look at that. So for those of us in the room, when we talk about veterans, who do you think on this slide is a veteran? I never get anybody with this anymore. You know, I used to put this slide up and someone would say, I think she is, or I think the older gentleman is. But in reality, they all are, right? The fact is, and they're all Iraq combat veterans. These pictures were taken at a vet center, actually. And so we have women veterans are part of the Iraq combat experience and Afghanistan combat experience. So are some older veterans, right? Not all Iraq and Afghanistan veterans are younger veterans. Especially when it comes to National Guard and Reserve, they have a much higher age point than the active force. Some other examples of veterans, right? Ice-T. Everybody knows Ice-T now is, right, the guy, I can remember him as the lead singer from Body Count, as an actual like hip-hop artist, but all right, he's a cop now, but he was also in the Army. In fact, he's a Desert Storm veteran, and he looked around his community when he was young and he said, well, I'm probably going to end up joining a gang if I stay here, so he wanted to find the biggest, baddest gang out there, and he thought, well, the biggest, baddest gang out there is the one with machine guns, and he joined the Army. So he's an Army vet. Mel Brooks, who I think is the probably greatest comedic mind of all time, was at the Battle of the Bulge. So that might explain some of that dark humor in some of his movies, because he's a hardened combat vet, so a lot of combat in World War II. There's a lot of myths and stereotypes out there about veterans, right? Everyone seems to have their own picture of what is a veteran, who's a veteran, what are the stereotypes, right? So let's try and push some of those out of the way right now, right? Not all vets served in the infantry. I did, but not everybody did, right? Not all veterans are in crisis, too, right? We have this idea that veterans are just out there always constantly in crisis, but not all veterans are. We'll talk about some of the statistics around veterans in crisis later on, and we'll realize that it's not as high as we think. But also, veterans who do experience crisis aren't in crisis all the time, right? I have post-traumatic stress disorder. That's why I have my service dog who's in the room. I'm service-connected for post-traumatic stress. But as you can see, I'm not in crisis right now. As you probably know, I have a job. I work at Swords to Plowshares. I go to work every day. I have accommodations that get made for my disabilities just like anyone else would, but I'm fully employed. Post-traumatic stress, a veteran that experiences crisis at some times doesn't mean they're in crisis all the time. It certainly doesn't mean they're unemployable. Okay? Women, as we talked about, do serve in combat. And then we talked about the fact that not all veterans have post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Not all veterans have difficulty even readjusting. And we'll talk about some of those numbers later on. But one of these big myths is that every vet who gets out is going to end up homeless and on drugs and have push. That's just not true. We know that for a fact. We know that it's actually a small percentage of veterans who have difficulty readjusting. The majority of veterans don't have those difficulties readjusting. Right? We think of veterans as rigid, right? The people who still fold and roll their socks and underwear and have them in the exact place in the drawer. All right, just because that's true for me doesn't mean it's true for everyone. All right? We're actually quite flexible. The fact is that our work environments over the years have been so diverse, we had to be flexible, right? My office that I set up when I worked for a general in Iraq, it wasn't a nice cubicle with air conditioning. It was in the middle of Iraq, in Tikrit, Iraq. It meant we got mortared all the time. It meant power went out, we had to put on generators. I don't think there's a more flexible job set than you get when you spend time in the military, because I had to do things from walking through the woods with a rifle to moving sandbags to doing recovery operations in 9/11 to combat operations in Iraq. Some of the most flexible work that I ever had to do was working in the U.S. Army, working as an infantryman. Veterans with disabilities are unemployable, we seem to think, right? Like that, oh, this veteran has PTSD, we should just, let's just put them away somewhere and forget about that person, right? But the fact is that veterans with PTSD are Americans with disabilities. Americans with disabilities work all the time. My mom has been an employee at Home Depot for over 20 years. She suffers from pretty extreme depression. Does it stop her from going to work? No, it means she has to take some medication every day, right? She's employable, just like veterans with post-traumatic stress, veterans with disabilities, whether that's physical or mental health disabilities, are very employable. And in my opinion, probably some of the best employees that you can have. And the other thing is that all the people who are in the military self-identify as veterans. How many people in the room, sorry online, I can't ask you, but if you want, you can put your hands up at your desk. I'm okay with that. But who in the room here was in the military? All right, a good chunk of our room here was in the military. Now, of you, how many of you self-identify with the word veteran? So about half that, right? So just because someone was in the military doesn't mean that they self-identify with the word veteran, right? So even the word veteran we see can be a little problematic in our community. When I first got back from Iraq, I just got back from combat, but I worked for a general, I wasn't out there kicking down doors, I didn't do the typical infantry job, even though I was in the infantry. I didn't think of myself as a combat vet. I didn't associate with that word veteran, right? When I closed my eyes, I saw a veteran, I saw my uncle in Vietnam, I saw my grandfather in World War II. I didn't see a young person like me, right? I thought of it as the VFW hall and the older vets that you see. I didn't picture myself. I didn't self-identify with that. It wasn't until I started working in the veteran field that I went, wait, I actually am a veteran. I actually am a combat veteran. And that took a little bit to sink in even in me. So understand that not all of us self-identify with that term. So we'll talk a little bit about physical injuries, right? Because we spend a lot of time when we talk about veterans, we talk about mental health disabilities. Well, let's talk about some physical disabilities. I have them as well. So some of the more severe physical injuries that we tend to associate with veterans are the musculoskeletal, so missing limbs, paralysis, burns, traumatic brain injury. Now, traumatic brain injury doesn't have to be severe. I have a mild to moderate case of traumatic brain injury. I'm obviously still very employable. At least I hope my bosses still think I'm very employable. We'll see after today. But hopefully I'm still quite employable. And blindness. So blindness, deafness, these are all issues. All these physical issues can also be present in a veteran, and they're not separate necessarily from the mental health issues. Right? So there's more moderate ones, right? A lot of vets have bad knees, have bad backs, just the basic aches and pains, because being in the military also does age your body a little bit more, right? You're throwing on that rock, you're moving around. But this doesn't, again, mean that any of these folks are unemployable, right? We might have to make accommodations, but we make accommodations all the time. I was just at a lecture for someone from the White House who worked on disability rights, and he said that, everyone gets accommodations, right? You came in today to this room, you expected there to be a chair there, right? You didn't expect to have to bring your own chair, right? Some people do bring their own chairs to work, but you weren't expected to. You were given an accommodation. So we make accommodations for all of our employees, and they should all be reasonable accommodations. That doesn't change for someone with a physical or mental health disability. The big elephant in the room, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Watch out for those vets. Watch out for Rambo, and you'd be out in the woods hunting people down with arrows that explode. I don't know how arrows explode, but on Rambo it does. And I'm ready to freak out, right? No, that's not the case. Of course not. As a matter of fact, about 26% of veterans are going to experience either post-traumatic stress or some other mental health illness, right? You want to take it with, well, it's on the slide, so maybe asking you is not the best thing, but we think the amount is for the civilian sector, people who aren't in the military. It's exactly the same. It's 26%. So coming out of the military, there's no increased risk for mental health disorders. There just statistically is no increased risk for mental health disorders. Now, they might be a little bit different, right? Our post-traumatic stress, not a lot of people experience the same post-traumatic stress disorder as combat vets, but you're already employing people with mental health issues. You're already deploying someone who's bipolar. you're already deploying someone who has depression. You're already employing people who have physical, deploying, you're sending them overseas. You're already employing people who have physical injuries, right? You're deploying people who have carpal tunnel. You're employing people who use wheelchairs. You're employing people with disabilities already because Americans have disabilities. And you're employing Americans, you're going to employ people with disabilities. That's just a fact across the board. So we shouldn't be frightened off by veterans with disabilities because we don't experience them at any higher rate than the rest of the general public. So a little bit talking about some of the values that we bring, right? As a veteran, we bring some of these what we call soft skills, right, to the table. Most times you don't have to worry about that veteran showing up late, right? None of them are going to be on time. But if you're on time, as you all know from the military, you're late, right? If you're on time, you're late. So when we show up at stuff, our veteran staff is usually there 15 minutes early. And so that's the kind of soft skills that you're going to get. You're going to get those folks that are flexible enough that can actually meet the terms wherever your company is. So whether your company for the day has to go out and put together a big gala like we did last week here at Swords of Plowshares, our 40th anniversary gala, well, guess who was there setting up, setting up our silent auction, setting up our room, setting up the projector, setting up all that stuff? People who normally work in an office. They're not used to having to set up a silent auction or have any clue how to set up a silent auction. But you know what? Veterans are flexible. We're used to being flexible, and so we can actually make those adjustments and make things happen with sometimes very little resources, as we have learned from our time in the military, right? It's like, you have a spoon and a pile of rocks. All right, now build a house. Oh, okay, we figure out how to build that house, right? So there's a lot of soft skills that veterans are bringing with us as well to our employers. All right. Talk a little bit about military education, right? A lot of us know about boot camp or basic training, right? That's where you first learn. It's exactly what it says, right? It's basic training. It's the most basic how to be a soldier. It's how to march, how to shoot your weapon, how to run in formation, all the basics of how to be a soldier or a service member, excuse me, for other branches out there. I don't want Marines to start throwing stuff at me up here, like calling all service members soldiers or something. I know, Marines are sensitive. It's okay. The next thing that you'll go for is your specialty school, right? So for me, coming right out of basic training, I went to 12 Bravo School it was at the time. I was a combat engineer, basically a grunt with explosives. And I got to blow stuff up for 5 weeks. And so that was my specialty training. I later reclassed and became infantry, went to a different specialty school. Now with the military, there's tons of different jobs. So some of those specialty schools are computer maintenance folks, right? And they go to school for a year. Some of those folks do generator repairs, diesel mechanics. There's tons of different jobs. And some of them are a few weeks, like mine was 5 weeks to learn how to blow stuff up. And other people who do computer stuff can go in for years, or someone who goes to language school. Some of the language schools are 3 years long, just for their school, for their specialty school. So keep in mind, that's the specialty school. Now the other unique thing about military education that most people who just go to college and then go on to the civilian workforce never really experience is the professional development school, okay? I was a young specialist many years ago, probably too many for me at this point. I was a young specialist, and I wanted to become a sergeant. And in order to become a sergeant, in order to get my stripes, I had to go to a different school to learn how to lead. So we actually had leadership development courses, right? I went to PLDC, right? Primary Leadership Development Course. Yes, I still remember the acronym. Pretty excited about that one. All right. So I had to go to a professional leadership development course to learn how to lead soldiers into combat. I think I was 21, 22 years old, and I was learning how to actually lead. That's something that colleges don't teach, that most on-the-job training don't teach, that you have leaders who are not only taught how to lead in their day-to-day jobs, but also go to special schools to learn how to lead other people. So we're talking about people with these leadership qualities. That's something maybe to look out for, too, as you're going to be hiring veterans, is finding out what leadership schools they go to, because the different branches have different leadership schools. And some people who are in a long time went to 4, 5, 6 professional development leadership schools. The GI Bill. Everybody knows, when we talk about the GI Bill, we're talking about post-military education. Everybody knows you can use the GI Bill, you can go to school, you can get that 4-year degree, that 2-year degree, awesome, great. You can also use that degree for technical stuff, right? I know that there's a college in Florida that specially trains people to work on Harley Davidsons. They now take the GI Bill. So there's service members, there's veterans out there who said, I love motorcycles, I love me some Harley Davidsons, I want to be a Harley mechanic. Well, now the GI Bill can help that veteran become a Harley mechanic. So even if you don't employ from an office setting, right? If you're a railroad, for example, and you want more diesel mechanics, you want people who go, the GI Bill can pay for vets to go to those schools as well. All right. We're going to play a quick video here. The tech here hopefully will work out pretty smooth. If not, I apologize for any bumps that come in there. This is a video from the Got Your Six campaign, which is going to talk a little bit about some hiring initiatives from Macy's. Okay, so let me start this video, and let me turn off the mic.
My name is Tammy Spellman, and I am part of the I was deployed for all of 2005 to the Middle East as an officer. I worked in a lot of different fields, but essentially my specialty was human resources. I was responsible to know who was where on the battlefield. I think the great thing about the military is that they train you to be a leader. They train you to make decisions. They train you to understand that you have a group of people that you are responsible for. And it's not just, hey, you're responsible for them from 8 to 5. You're responsible for their lives. When you hire someone from the military, you are already getting a well-seasoned and trained professional. And so I think all of those things we've learned in the military translate so nicely to Macy's. Comprehensively, there's a lot that a veteran can bring to the table for any business in America.
All right, so I really encourage you, the Got Your Six campaign has lots of these like cool little videos and things like that. I really encourage you to go online, have a look at some of these videos, and listen to some of the experiences of both hiring managers, how to hire veterans and maintain that high level of talent, as well as the veterans themselves who've gone through this experience. So the bottom line on this is that hiring veterans is good for business, right? If you can hire and maintain the top talent, it's good for your business.
Veterans are part of that top talent pool. Now we're going to get into some more of the like how-tos part of this training. So the first thing that I want to talk about is your materials. All right. A lot of people who want to hire veterans, they start out with the best of intentions that they want to hire veterans. Veterans are bringing those skills. They want them. Not everybody realizes how good for business hiring veterans can be, but they want a sense of being able to give back, of what it's like hiring veterans. So they start to put together materials. If you take a look at some of the materials that Source produces, if you notice what's not there, let's talk about that first. Or let's talk about some of the do's, right? Some of the things you want to have happen, right? You want to clearly state what your program is. And you want to be who's eligible for it, who you're looking for, that sort of thing. So if you're specifically looking for veterans who worked on, let's say, diesel engines, because you're a shipping company that has lots of trucks and you're hiring diesel mechanics, we'll put that in your advertisement, right? Put that in your materials. And we'll talk about later on how you can actually put out there in the military lingo how to do that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you want to be really clear on who you're looking for those programs, okay? The use of graphics and pictures, all right? We don't want to look like we're putting out things from 1995 that are clip art from Microsoft Office, right? I think most of us by now look at that and go, it's not really the most professional thing we could be putting out. So what do we want to put out? We want to put pictures that are the people we want to hire, right? If we want to make sure, an effort to hire women veterans, maybe putting some women veterans in our materials is what we want. Putting the photos and the faces out there of the people we're looking for is the way that you're going to attract that talent, not by putting out pictures of like Uncle Sam pointing at somebody or lots of flags waving, right? We'll talk about some of those in the do nots soon, but some pictures for good outreach materials that have all been cleared for public use. There's a website, oops, I used the wrong one. There's a website here that you can go to and actually look up some of those photos. Now, they're even better if you can use photos from your company, right? If your CEO is a veteran, if your hiring manager is a veteran, if your production manager is a veteran, if you've got 10 veterans on the line that are cooking for you in your kitchen, using photographs of the veterans who are already employed there is not only a way to recruit more veterans, but it's also a way to show that you really do appreciate the veterans that are there. It's going to help you retain that talent as well. So I really would encourage you to use photographs, good photographs, of the veterans that you have employed doing their jobs. That's a really great thing to put on your materials. Talk about some of those don'ts. Don't try to be like overly complex, right? I've seen job advertisements that put so much stuff in there, I'm just like, I don't even know what this is, right? You're being so over complex. You don't have to explain every little detail in all of your materials. Now maybe in a job ad, you get a little bit more detail, but just in the flyers and things like that for materials, you don't have to worry about being so overly complex. Another big thing is flags and the stereotype, what we think of as being patriotic. We're seeing now that veterans don't react any more or less positive or negatively to any of that material than anyone else does, right? And I see a lot of companies, I went to a lot of dinners this past Veterans Day and luncheons for Veterans Day, and quite a few had American flags just plastered over everything. Well, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's not going to reach the people that you want as well as things like a photograph of those actual people, right? People want to see themselves in these materials. So just throwing up American flags behind a random silhouette of a soldier saluting might not be the best use of that space for that photo, okay? The other big one is the use of the term female. You'll notice throughout our presentation we make a concerted effort not to use the word female. We use the word woman or women. And a big reason for this, there's multiple reasons. One is inside the military, the term female almost becomes derogatory in some senses, right? I was in infantry and was like, oh, that's the female area. And we don't do that with men. That's the reality of it, is we don't do that with men. We don't say male this and male. We say men. We say man. So we should make that same accommodation for women. We should be using the same terminology, not saying female and then men, right? So that's something that we should take a look at. Okay. So talking about some of these skills and the way that they're translated, right? The military's jobs, they get called lots of different things, but that might not actually be what they do, right? I was a combat engineer. Does that mean that I'm qualified to be an engineer in civilian society? Does that mean I know how to put together blueprints and draw? No. Let me tell you right now, not at all. My job as a combat engineer was blowing things up. Now, can I do that? Oh, yes, I know how to do that. I was quite proficient at that task while I was in the military. But that's not really so. And there's lots of jobs like that, right? So if we look at a cryptology linguist, what? Right? That's just a marketing communication specialist. All right? These jobs, sometimes you see it on paper, we don't know how to translate it. Right? So let's talk a little bit about how to do that, both from the veteran perspective as well as for you from the employer perspective. Now keep in mind that, remember how I said earlier that you want to be able to put out, let's say you're looking for a diesel mechanic. Well, how do you know what a diesel mechanic is in the military? So you can go to this website here, right here, and they have this really great skills translator. So there's two different things you can do with this. The top one here, if we look, you can actually put in so if I'm a veteran and I want to say, how do I market myself to the civilian world? How do I say what skills the infantry actually taught me? How do I say what skills being a combat engineer has equipped me with to bring to the civilian force? Well, I can put in, right here, I can put in 12 Bravo, 11 Bravo, the different MOSs that I had, and then it'll let me know on the next page what some of those skills are. Now, for you as employers, you can do the same thing, right? You can go here, click this, and put in keywords that you're looking for. So let's say I'm looking for a welder, right? Okay, so I literally did this the other day. I went to this, I typed in welder, and look what I got. Look at all the different jobs. These are just the jobs that are specifically welders in the military. So if I'm looking for a welder, welding positions, I can put out there that I'm looking for a Navy enlisted 4955. Does that mean anything to me? Navy enlisted 4955? Nope, never heard of it before. And you know what? I was in the Army. The Navy confuses me. I don't know much at all about the Navy, but I know that I can go to the skills translator, put in welder, and I can know that that's the Navy enlisted 4955 or the Army enlisted 44 Charlie. I can put these all in my job, not application, excuse me, my job advertisements, right? So those adverts that go out, and you're putting those online, you're putting them on Craigslist, you're putting them on Idealist or wherever you're advertising your jobs, you can be putting in there that you're specifically looking for certain military jobs. So that when a veteran looks at that, they know just from seeing that lingo in there that you've gone through some kind of veteran cultural competency. They know they have that faith. Okay, if I go here, I'm not just going to be treated like a stereotype. I'm not just going to be that crazy veteran that everybody's just waiting to flip out and go postal, right? Because that's not the reality of what veterans do in the workforce. And they can know that from things like this. And you can help get that top talent, and you can retain that top talent. So we all know that, especially with the Americans with Disabilities Act, we obviously can't discriminate against veterans. We can't say that there's a veteran hiring preference, things like that. But what we can do is say that veterans are strongly encouraged to apply, right? We can say that with people with disabilities. We can say that with people of color. We can say that with women. We can say that for queer people, that we are strongly encouraging you to apply. And we strongly encourage you to put things like veterans strongly encouraged to apply in your ad the same way you do with women, people of color, the queer community, all of these different things that we put into our job ads that are strongly encouraged because we want a diverse workforce. And part of that diverse workforce is making sure that we have veterans there as well. So you can do that. And there are actually, we used to have a slide about this, but we took it out with some feedback. There are some tax advantages to hiring veterans, but I'll admit they're really small, and for most companies, they're really not worth the effort of doing. We want to hire veterans because it's good for the bottom line. It's good for our companies. And yeah, there are some tax benefits that you can get out of it, but they're very small. The reality is if you're looking to hire veterans, you should be looking to hire veterans because they're going to improve your company. They're going to improve the product that you put out. Not really because you're going to get a couple thousand here or there on a tax break. There are those breaks out there if you want to really put in the effort to get them, but for the most part, most companies are going to find it's really not worth that kind of work. We want to employ veterans because it's good for our business. Let's talk a little bit about veteran affinity groups. Right? I was at Intuit a couple days ago, and they have this really great veterans network across the country. And they have different chapters for their veteran affinity groups, and they go do volunteer work together, they hang out together, they help each other work together. The Veterans Affinity Group can be a really great way to make sure that vets transitioning, when they have those questions that they might think are silly, like, where do I put this TPS report? The laughs are for those who know where the TPS report comes from. Thank you for getting that reference. But where do I file this TPS report? I might feel weird going to someone else because I think every office has always known that. We didn't have TPS reports in the military, but every other office seems to have them, and I feel kind of embarrassed to ask that. Well, but if I can go to that veteran mentor in my veteran affinity group and say, hey, what are these TPS reports things here? What do I do with them? Who do I hand that into? Why do I have to have them in triplicate? Why do I have 6 bosses? Those are the types of things that you can ask. That was a specific reference. Thank you also for getting it. Those are specific tasks that by having those veteran affinity groups, you can have mentorship, which is, I think, we can all agree is really important for maintaining that talent level, right, of keeping people there. And so veteran affinity groups can be a really great way to do that. It allows your veterans a place to gather and a place to get feedback from each other. Well, what's working for you? What's not working? There's a lot of resources out there for veterans that end up getting shared word of mouth. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Another good reason to hire veterans is a community of support for us outside of the workplace. But the Veterans Affinity Group can be really great. So if you see, some of them take place much more online, right? This is a screenshot of a FedEx Veteran Affinity Group, and they have a Facebook group, and they talk online, and they talk back and forth and get to know FedEx drivers from California, are interacting with FedEx drivers in New York that are veterans and talking about, oh, I'm having this experience, what are you having? And they're working their way through that together and building that camaraderie and also building that company as not just a team, but as a family, right? We come to think of the military as a family, right? we talk about our brothers and sisters in arms. We talk about it in terms of family. And that can bring that kind of family environment to your company. And it doesn't matter how large you are. FedEx is a pretty big company, I think we can all agree. They're flying packages all over the world. But they manage a Veterans Affinity group. They do it online. Others do it in person. Others do a mix of in-person, online, all of these things. We had a question? I'll stop.
Did you earlier say TPS?
That was just a generic, TPS report was just a generic term. From the movie Office Space. Sorry. For those who didn't get my reference, it was from the movie Office Space. Love to get that reference into an HR training too. Okay, some other veteran affinity groups, right? AT&T is this really cool veteran affinity group. And again, AT&T, really large, international company. But they have veteran affinity groups with chapters in their different offices. Their unions have different chapters of their veteran affinity group in their office. So they have this mix. They have it online. They have it in person. They share resources, right? So when a veteran, say, might have an issue with housing instability, well, that happens not just to veterans. That happens to people, right? People get into situations where they might lose their housing. They're facing, the rent increases in San Francisco, and it's tough to keep up. Most people don't have a place to go for that. Veterans do. Veterans have housing programs like SSVF that can help them move into a more secure location, things like that most people don't. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But AT&T, their group focuses on sharing those resources, making sure that veterans can, when they show up to the job, can worry about their work and not worry about all those other things going on. And if they have those things that are creeping up for them, they have an outlet, someone that they can talk to about. A lot of the non-military folks, they don't have that, right? They don't have those options, those resources, so they don't have those sharing groups either. We'll talk a little bit about job ads, right? Placing veteran-friendly job ads is a big, that's your first introduction a lot of times. A lot of times companies, they're not AT&T, right? Lots of people have heard of AT&T who've never worked there. I have an AT&T phone. I know who they are. But when we talk about other companies, Intuit, I went to their Veterans Day lunch a few days ago. I'd never heard of Intuit before that. I didn't know what they did. I couldn't pick them out of a corporate lineup. I had no idea what Intuit did. Turns out they do a lot of cool tech stuff, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on over there, and their veterans group is doing that. Well, if you haven't heard that, and I'm just looking through job listings, and that's that first touch that you're going to have. So it's really important that that first introduction be veteran-friendly. So doing things like we talked about, if you're looking for that welder, putting that Army enlisted 44 Charlie is strongly encouraged to apply on there. Things like that. So including, this is MOS, military occupational specialty, which we talked about before, all right? Or military job field. Not all the branches call it MOS, that's an Army thing, but it's largely understood, and most of the other branches at least know what an MOS is. So if you're using terminology like MOS, military occupational specialty, even though the other branches don't use that terminology themselves, they understand what it means, okay? Mention veterans in your workforce or in your leadership. If your CEO is a Gulf War vet or Vietnam vet or maybe even a Korean vet still, I don't know. But if your CEO is a vet, you should be talking about that. At Swords, we're at about 40% of our workforce. We're over 160 employees at Swords of Plowshares, and 40% of that are veterans. We hire a lot of veterans. Well, we want to put out there, then, when we're hiring, that veterans are strongly encouraged to apply, and that we do hire a lot of veterans. We put our money where our mouth is, quite literally on this one. We make sure that we walk the walk on this, because we do think it's important to hire veterans to do this work. All right? Promoting through social media, right? When you're out there and you're putting that out there, you want to reach the top talent for veterans. You want to be making sure that this is a tweet actually composed right here for Verizon. I know I just talked about AT&T, so I'll balance it out with some Verizon talk here, right? This tweet was put out by an HR manager over with Verizon. 85% of MOSs have direct counterpart to Verizon. Transitioning, connect with Verizon too. So putting that stuff out there through Twitter, using Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, using these social media avenues are a way to connect, especially to younger veterans. LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, a lot of veterans, even in the veteran affinity groups, they talk about, okay, how do we make our LinkedIn? How are we putting ourselves out there to the top talent? Your LinkedIn pages for your companies should be saying that you want top talent. You just don't want, right? I don't think any company just wants to hire veterans just because we want to hire veterans, right? We want the top talent out there. We want the best of the best. And veterans are a lot of the best when we're talking about this. We want that top talent. And so using the social media to get out there, making sure that your social media reflects that. So then there's the other things that just every employee, right, wants. Veterans want the same thing. So just because we're trying to attract veteran talent doesn't mean that we're not saying the same things that everyone else wants to hear, right? Just like veterans with disabilities, we're no different than Americans with disabilities. You're already hiring that. So make sure we're still putting out there growth opportunities, benefits that are available, all those other things, the pay scale, the things that anyone would want to know if they're applying to a job. You still want to include that, right? You can't just skip over that. And like, oh, well, we talked about wanting those 44 Charlies, we're good, we don't need to put what the pay scale is, what the benefits are, what the growth opportunity. Of course, veterans want that stuff as well. I know we want it. So we'll talk, I just want to talk for a second about Pacific Gas and Electric. We've partnered with Pacific Gas and Electric at Swords and Plowshares quite a few times. And Pacific Gas and Electric did some cool stuff. So they came to us and they said, we really want to hire veterans. We think there's a lot of veterans out there who have the skills that we need, but we're not really good. We don't know how to hire these veterans. We have a training program, and we want to set up a classroom just for the vets. So they came and they partnered with Swords and Plowshares, and we made sure that we put veterans who wanted to work at PG&E into that classroom to learn. And then when it came time to do the hiring process, we made sure that we worked with them and did resumes, we got them ready for their employment, and then we set them to an interview as fully prepared so that they could then get the job from that training program. That entire time, there was a symbiotic relationship between Swords and Plowshares and PG&E. We were able to make sure that we got them really great veterans to fill their positions, and they had got to learn how to become more veteran-friendly in that process as well. So I'll reference that a few times, and we'll talk a little bit later on about how to actually partner with a veteran service organization. And if you're in the Bay, I really strongly encourage you to reach out to Swords. But if you're not in the Bay, I know we've got lots of people online from all over the country. Look at what some of those veteran service organizations are in your community that you can partner with. Who's doing this really great work? Because there are veterans organizations across the country doing really amazing work helping veterans get employment. Partnering with those organizations can really help you and take some of that burden off so that you don't have to be experts in the military to do this. Right? So when you're talking about linking up with veteran service organizations, right? So there's some different kind of things that we can offer. So some of the stuff that we offer at Swords and Plowshares are direct placement, right? Job brokering, what we talk about. So job brokering for us is, a company comes to us, let's say it's Walmart, who has done this in the past, who comes to Swords and Plowshares and says, we have 10 store manager positions that are opening up, and we want to fill them with veterans. How do we do that? So we say, well, we'll handle the job brokering for you. So we put together the job ads. We put together the resumes. We make sure that every person who goes over to Walmart for an interview is hireable on the spot. That's the type of person that we know that company wants. So you don't have to sort through thousands of applications and do tons of, we do a lot of that work. We can take that off of your plate for you so that you worry about doing what you do best at your company, right? Whatever that might be, whether that's selling groceries or whether that's making widgets for the next Ford Fusion. Whatever it is that you do, we want you to do that to the best of your abilities and have the top talent to do that. The next thing that we can do is the training, right? So we can help set up cohort models. We can set up trainings for a group of veterans to go do together. We can set up those one-off trainings so that one person that really needs to get that training. And then we also leverage money not just through our training programs, but also through individual donors, grants, private donations, so we can help to do some of the bridge funding that other programs can't, right? There's lots of employment programs out there, but who's going to help a veteran get to that employment program? Who's going to help the veteran make sure that they have the equipment for it, right? Because in the military, all of our equipment was there. We didn't have to worry about, well, where are these pliers coming from or whatever else you needed to use, right? you didn't have to worry about that. Well, how are workers getting that today? How's a veteran who's just getting out of the military going to be able to get that? So our programs can help with that sort of thing as well, right? And so these are more kind of good reasons to pair up with a veterans organization. Like I said before, also, veterans come with this kind of built-in continuum of care, right? We have this built-in system for us. So again, an example, housing instability. Lots of people experience homelessness in this country, not just veterans, right? I'm sure that employees that work for you have struggled with housing, right? Have been evicted, have had to move, and what's happened? It cuts into their work, right? It's really hard to get much work done when you don't know where you're going to stay that night, right? You don't know where your housing is going to be. That's not a veteran issue. That's a human issue. Housing is a basic human need, right? And so if you're thinking about, oh, I'm not sure where I'm going to live tonight or tomorrow, right now I'm staying on somebody's couch, that's going to affect your work performance. And most people don't have an outlet for that, don't have resources. Veterans do. Veterans have programs like SSVF, like HUD-VASH. They have programs, our transitional programs that are out there for veterans that just aren't there for non-vets. And there's lots of other programs in that too, okay? And so making sure that if you know these programs as well, so that's another reason, connecting with a veteran service organization like Swords to Plowshares, so that if you know that a veteran does have those, or even if you don't, you can put that out to your veteran affinity group so that nobody has to come to you and say, yeah, I'm fake. Because that's a pride issue. A lot of veterans have that pride issue. They don't want to ask for that help sometimes. But if you just put that information out there, then the veteran says, oh, that's what that program's for. I've used SSVF. I've been a client of these services. There's no shame in that. They've been great for me. They've been great for lots of veterans. And it allows me to stay employed and not have to stop working because I now go out and apartment hunt. I now have to figure out, okay, how am I going to move? How am I going to afford movers? Right? I have a real bad back injury. I can't really lift all of my books because I'm a smart guy, I got lots of books. And so I can't do that with my back. Well, what am I going to do? If I'm a civilian, what do? There's no programs out there. With veterans, there's a program. There's a built-in system of care. And that's health benefits, right? Health benefits are a big part. I've never used health benefits for my job before because I get care at the VA. And believe it or not, I like my care at the VA. I like going to my VA doctor. I like the fact that I go to one building to see all of my specialists that I need to go to. So I utilize the VA. I've never used health benefits through my employer before, right? So these kinds of things can actually save you money, can keep your employees more productive because I don't have to worry about, do I need to get an appointment for this? Is my insurance going to cover this? Is the housing going to be there for me tomorrow or next week? Those programs are there for veterans, makes me able to focus on work while I'm at work. In order to do this, in order for you all to become veteran friendly, one of the big things that we really need is a game plan, right? We can't just willy-nilly just like start looking at, Jeff mentioned materials. Let's just do materials, right? And not look at anything else. We need to create a game plan. We know what we're going to do, right? So we need to translate what it means, what we learned today about what it means to be veteran friendly. Reach out to those veteran service organizations. If you're in the Bay, create that relationship with our E&T program, employment and training program at Swords to Plowshares. Some of the best people that I know are working up there on that third floor for us in the employment and training. And so we put together some checklists. There will be a checklist for you all in your packets as well. And for those online, we can make sure that you get these slides as well. But going through it and really doing these things as a solid plan, right? So review your brochures. Look at what materials you're putting out. How do they look? And getting that feedback from the veterans that are already on staff. You've probably already been hiring veterans. Even if they don't, I asked earlier, you might be asking and talking about in terms of veterans. And some people I've talked to say, well, we don't have any veterans on staff. Really? If you asked if anyone was in the military, and all of a sudden it changes. Oh, well, yeah, we have people who are in the military. They're veterans, right? Even if they're not self-identified, those are veterans. And so making sure you're asking questions in the right way, looking at your brochures, your recruitment materials, your websites. Our websites are a driving factor. If you have an app, your app is a driving factor for your business, right? How does your app, how does your website reflect you being veteran friendly? How does it reflect your company being veteran friendly? What pictures are on there? How are you phrasing your questions? Are you using that the terminology that we talked about today, right? In your job advertisements next, right? So you look at your brochures, not your job advertisements. Are you putting in those MOSs? Are you using the skills translator that we talked about? Are you saying that service-connected veterans are strongly encouraged to apply? Using terminology like that. So service-connected, what does that mean? What does that mean? That just means that the Department of Veterans Affairs recognizes that your disability comes directly from your service in the military. So I'm service-connected for post-traumatic stress. I'm service-connected for a spinal cord injury, right? These are service-connected injuries. So saying that service-connected veterans are strongly encouraged to apply. Advertising to veterans and military groups, right? So if you know that there's military groups out there, if you know that your local chapter of IAVA, Iraq Afghanistan Veterans of America, and you can go to their, say, happy hour and say, hey, we're looking to hire a bunch of Iraq vets, and here's some flyers, and go to this website, check us out. Are you going to those events? Are you interacting with the veteran groups in your area? And there's lots of different veteran groups in the area. There's groups out there that work on physical fitness, right? Red, White, and Blue, I believe, works on physical fitness stuff, right? They're out there in the community. They're doing volunteering, but they're also doing things like canoeing and hiking also. Are you putting your jobs out there to those groups? Are you talking to those veteran groups out there? Then partnering with those veteran service organizations. So organizations like Swords to Plowshares that are doing the grassroots work serving veterans. Are you partnering with us? And hey, I would love it if everybody partnered with Swords. I'm very proud to work at Swords. I love my job, and I want everybody to work with Swords. But it's not really feasible, right? We can't work with every organization in the world. We live in the Bay. We have limitations. So wherever you are, reaching out to the veteran service organizations in your area. There's great veteran service organizations in every part of this country. Finding out who the veteran service organizations are doing a great job in your community, partnering with them, allowing them to do some of that job brokering and training, things like that, all right? When you're in the interview process, how are you asking questions? I'll go back to, if you're asking, oh, are you a veteran? You're not asking a question that's going to give you the best results, right? Versus saying, were you in the military? Well, how long did you spend in the military? Where were you stationed? Asking things in your interview that get past some of the basic, the front level questions that we ask, things like, in your military experience, I understand that veterans have to work in a flexible work environment. Tell me some of the creative problem solving you had to use in a situation when you were in the military. Because I can tell you a lot of that stuff, right? I can tell you from my own experience that when we were deployed for 9/11, the NYPD, every one of their precincts used a different radio frequency. They couldn't talk to each other. So because I was in the military, because of my military training, we made sure that all the checkpoints for NYPD could talk to each other by giving them all military radios and putting a Humvee at each checkpoint so that the NYPD could use our radios to talk to each other. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but that was a lot of logistical maneuvering to make that seemingly small problem, which could be a huge security risk when you're talking about securing the biggest terrorist attack that's ever happened on our country's soil. And you're trying to coordinate between the police effort in that, making sure they can all talk to each other is a pretty big thing. That's problem solving at its best right there. That's what military training helped me be able to do. So asking questions like that in the interview process, getting past just the like, oh, you were stationed in Hawaii. That was fun. Were there pineapples? That's a direct quote that I've heard from someone interviewing a veteran, okay? Going through, what are some of those problem solving? All right? Tell me some of the challenges that you had to overcome in the military. Tell me what you did to do that. Tell me what you did to lead your team. How were you able to bring your team together? These are questions that you can ask folks in the military, and they'll have answers for you, right? I can give you 50 different ways that I had to adapt and overcome when I was in the military with like a Gerber, some 550 cord, and my boots, and that's all I had. But I had to make something huge, right? I had to make this big project out of it. Well, we figured out how to do it. Why? Because that's some of the stuff that we did in the military. We adapted, we overcame those things. Asking about those things in the interview process is going to be a big way that you can get at and past that surface level stuff, right? Then on the job, when that person does work for you, do you have that affinity group, the veteran military affinity group? Keep in mind, like, what are you doing? You probably have members of the National Guard and the reserves in your company. Do you have a program set up so if they do get activated, to make sure that they know that you're going to abide by the law, that they know that their job is going to be there for them when they come back. How are you working to support those active guard and reservists that are still drilling? They're doing the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. How do you do that in your company? Making sure that you have policies and programs in place and that the veterans and military service members who are working for you know about them. That's another key thing, making sure that you're communicating to your employees. If you want to retain this top talent, we have to make sure that we're not only have these policies in place in a book somewhere that's on a shelf that gets dusty all the time. You got to crack open the binder and it's like Tales from the Crypt every time you open it, right? No, we want to make sure that these policies actually help veterans and get into their hands. Okay? Let's see. Your organization, the fact that you're in here taking this course, letting your employees know, hey, we're doing this, we're partnering with swords, we're going out, we're taking courses on military cultural competency. If you want to come to this thing with me, I'm going to this swords training on cultural competency for the military. You're a vet, you want to come with me and like help me through it and go through this course with me? Understanding what courses are you taking? How are you improving? Let's see. Does your EAP, most companies now have EAP programs, right? Employee assistance programs that you can call up. Does your employee assistance program know about vets issues? Because not all of them do. Making sure that your EAP knows that if you have a veteran who calls and says, you know, I've been in the military and I'm having housing instability. Oh, you're a veteran. Hey, do you know about SSVF? Do you know about it? Do you know about this program? Making sure that your EAP knows that as well. Not just, you don't have to be the experts. If you have EAP, make sure they know about veteran issues, that they can not only explain it to your employees who call, but they should be able to also explain it to you. Right? And if they can't explain it to you, they're not going to be able to explain it to your employees that call. So testing your EAP, making sure that they know the veterans resources that are out there so that as veterans call those programs, they can be directed to the veteran resources as well as civilian resources. Because as a veteran, it doesn't mean that I'm all of a sudden ineligible for all the other resources that are out there. It just means I have more resources at my fingertips. Right? And then beginning the on-the-job training and job coaching and job mentoring. Right? Having mentors is great for anybody out there, but especially for those veterans who might feel weird. I spent 9 years in the Army. 9 years. So from when I was 17 years old, I spent in the Army. Right? There are certain things that I never really had to do. I never had a cubicle before. So little things like, what are these big needle things that everybody uses in their cubicle? Oh, that's just to pin stuff to your cubicle. Well, maybe that's common sense to people who have worked in cubicles for years. But I look at that big needle and I'm like, what are you using that for? Right? So we put in IVs here? What is that big needle for? Right? I mean, that's a stupid little thing, right? It's not a big deal. But if I have a veteran mentor that I can go to and say, I know this is a silly question, I don't want to waste a lot of your time with it, but what's this needle? Right? I mean, that's a silly little thing. We all laugh about it. But 9 years, when my office was a combat zone, I didn't have to deal with things. I didn't have to realize. I literally at my company, when I started at Swords of Plowshares, I had never had a phone system like we have at Swords of Plowshares. I didn't know what the different blinking red buttons were. I had to go to ask somebody, hey, what do these mean when these buttons blink? Because I got nothing on this. I don't know how to use this thing. And nobody went, ugh. I can't believe I have to answer questions about, no, it's just like, oh, that does this. That's just the open line. It means that somebody's on that line. Oh, okay, cool. Didn't take long. And nobody looked down at me for not knowing that, right? But we think that, oh, this guy spent 9 years in the Army. He's got to know all this stuff. I don't. And having that job coaching, some of that on-the-job training, and it might be little stuff. It might be really big stuff. It might be that I really know how to take apart that diesel engine and put it back together in my sleep, but I don't know how to maybe use my time card. Or maybe there's a small thing in that diesel engine that doesn't translate from the military vehicles to a civilian vehicle. So I might need the small bridge things here and there. That job training, that on-the-job coaching and mentoring can really help veterans feel comfortable at your company and therefore stay there longer, right? So we don't just want to get this top talent. We want the top talent to stay at our company. We want that top talent around for years. We want the retention factor. Again, bottom line, being a veteran-friendly company will help you gain and retain that talent. Right? And not just talent, but top talent, top-tier talent. You know, there's a lot of veterans out there. If you look at lot of Fortune 500 companies, their top executives, you have veterans in those companies, right? When we look at any social movement in the United States, we've got veterans who've been leaders in that movement. We are leaders. We've been trained to be leaders. We've gone through courses to be leaders. Hire us, let us lead in your companies as well. And you'll find that those veterans bring real value to your company. So now we'll open it up, we'll take some questions from online. So if you have any questions online, if you can just type them into your box there and Kevin will read them off for us and get us, so we'll be able to answer questions online. We're going to try and take the online questions first and then questions in the room, because after we stop the broadcast, we're going to actually workshop some stuff in the room. So all of your questions and concerns in the room, we're definitely going to get some. Let me take some of the ones from the internet now. Do we have any so far, Kevin? We're working on the technical stuff. They're typing in as we speak. So okay. So just maybe we can take one question in the room while we work out the technical stuff. If somebody's got a quick question, we can yes.
You're going to introduce or talk more about your stuff?
Oh, right. So Resistance, who's now sleeping over there, is my service dog. So I'm diagnosed and service connected with post-traumatic stress disorder, which means that some nights I don't sleep so well. If you notice, when I come into a room, I'll put my back to a wall. My service dog allows me to operate in a much more holistic capacity, as though my disabilities weren't there as much. So I can sit in a big banquet hall for our 40th gala because I know that my dog is right underneath me and she watches, and nobody can come at me quite so aggressively. And not that she'll attack them. She's a beagle. She's not attacking him. She'll give him the cute eyes. But she will put herself in the way. So I can concentrate on what I'm doing, and my service dog allows me to do that. So a reasonable accommodation that's sort of made is that I can have a dog at work, and because she is a trained and registered service dog, I can have my dog at work. That's, not a lot of people, you can't just bring your German Shepherd to work because you like having her with you, right? I love having her with me, but she's working. She serves a job. She does that. So if you notice in days like today, right now she's kind of tuckered out and sleeping over there, but a lot of times, and she'll do this throughout the day, she'll get up and she'll walk around the room and then check back in with me, just say, hey, it's cool, you're safe, don't worry about it. And so there's things that I don't have to think about with my disability because I have her with me. And we have a question online.
Okay, Jeff, our first question from our online audience is from Deanna Alm. Recommended job boards for posting for veterans. I recently put 4 jobs on vetready.com, but did not receive a single applicant from there. Do you have any recommendations?
Yes. So everybody heard the question about, hopefully online you heard, the question was about job boards. Where do we put these advertisements up? We're putting them up on certain websites. We're not getting responses. Well, putting your job advertisements up on your web is one way to do things. What I would strongly encourage you to do is actually partner with a local veteran service organization, places where veterans are really going. It's really hard to tell which websites are actually being trafficked by veterans. So putting your job advertisements out there online. The other thing is, how are your job advertisements being written, right? Are you putting the MLS and things like that in there? Because veterans aren't just going to veteran job sites, right? They're going to Craigslist, they're going to Idealist, they're going to the other places as well. As the veteran job sites. But I think that the in-person connections that you can make locally with a local veteran service organization that has a job program, making those connections will probably go a lot further for you than just putting things on a message board or just going to a hiring fair, things like that. You're going to get a lot better result if you actually partner with a veteran service organization. What I can do for you as well after this is I will check with our employment and training program and see where they recommend you post things. That's not quite my area of expertise on the exact places to locate, but I'll get some for you and make some recommendations for you. But again, strongly encourage any organization out there to really partner with that veteran service organization. You're going to get a lot more long-term out of it than just filling those couple positions. You're really going to increase how veteran-friendly your company is. Any other questions online?
Yes, our next question is, can you address how employers can respond when there are concerns with allergens related to service dogs?
Yeah, okay. So I actually run into this a lot with the allergens with service dogs. So there are certain things, I've been to places that you can get a HEPA filter that can help to filter the air so that if there is someone with allergies for dogs that, Not all service dogs need to wander around. Resistance, my service dog, does wander around our office quite a bit. She doesn't have to. If folks said, hey, that's a problem at the office, we don't really want her wandering around, I would just keep her at my desk. Right? She wanders around, people interact with her all the time. She has a way of knowing who's having a down day and kind of giving them a little extra attention around the office. We've definitely seen that. But if that's an issue, the reasonable accommodation doesn't mean that that veteran gets free run of the place because they're a veteran with a disability. It means it's a reasonable accommodation, so they can bring the dog to work, but there's things you can do, especially around the HEPA filters, air filters, things like that. You can ask that the service animal be restricted to a certain area while they're at work, that they're with them. There are definitely limitations that you can put on it, and you can work with that veteran or with anyone with that disability who uses a service dog to create the right boundaries that work for everyone in your employment. Okay, let's get a couple more questions from the audience, and then in a few we're gonna end the broadcast after a couple more questions, and we'll really get into the stuff in the room here. Any more? Bueller? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about some of the employment training and job programs at Swords?
Sure. So so for Swords and Plowshares, we do, again, the job brokering. So companies come to us and they say that we have X amount of jobs and here's what the jobs are here, and we put together, make sure that we're advertising for the job. We then take the applications that come in, we help with resumes for that, and so that the only people that go for those jobs are really qualified candidates. That if we send over 3 people for this job, you could pick any of those 3 and be very happy with them. It's a matter of figuring out which one of those people who have the skills that you need are the right fit chemistry-wise for your organization. We also have job training programs, right? So, I gave that example of PG&E, right? They had a bunch of positions open. They had a training program. We made sure that we filled that training program with vets that really wanted to be there. We were able to help with transportation costs, make sure the vets could get to those programs, make sure that they could get any books that they needed or any other equipment that they needed, whereas a lot of organizations aren't able to do that. Right? They just have training programs, and without partnering with us, they wouldn't have had those things available. The other thing that we'll do is what we call a cohort model, right? So we might get a whole class, let's say, of folks that need to go through some electrician's course, right? And we know that there's companies out there that need 30 of these folks, so we'll put together a class of 30 or 40 veterans that's just the veterans going through this course as a cohort where they go through together. And an unintended consequence of that is it helps to build the veteran community. Right? There's a lot of community, and community is really important to us as human beings. It's really important for us as veterans as well. And so being able to start forming that veteran affinity group early on by going through a cohort model together is an unintended consequences of us doing this kind of work, where we help to actually foster the veteran community at the same time as we supply the kind of skills that employers need to be able to hire. Yes?
As an HR person, mainly sports, what can the HR department do to help to hire? I know we have an employment training department. What can we do to work together to focus on hiring vets? Especially for me personally, I've never hired a vet. So I don't know how I can help either, just the regular what I do to hire anybody. So do you have any suggestions for, again, we have an employment training, we have HR, how can we work together as a team to make it to hire?
Right. Well, you took the first big step, right? You came to this training, so hopefully we went over some of that stuff in the training, things like what you're asking for in your interview process, what we're doing as far as the putting out the job ads. Are we putting out there the MOSs that might be key? Are we putting out there that veterans are strongly encouraged to apply? Are we putting out there that veterans are, that service-connected veterans are strongly encouraged to apply? Are we putting out there that if you're at Swords of Plowshares, that the executive director and the CEO are both veterans? Are we putting out that 40% of our staff is veterans? What are we putting out there to the veterans in those job ads to let them know that we are a really veteran-friendly company? when we're talking about some of the benefits that are offered, what are some of the benefits that are offered to everyone out there? You know, there's a lot of great benefits for working at Swords. And I'm not just saying that because my boss is in the room. It's actually true, right? The fact is that we do have those. So what are we putting out there? Are we making sure that we're highlighting those veteran issues throughout that process, right? As far as partnering with and how to work closer together, some of the things you can do. You have veterans, and now you're in a lucky situation where you have right down the hall, you can go and talk to our employment training. But this is for any company, right? When you're talking about, okay, I got this job ad. Well, I know that Jeff's a veteran. Let me just go over, hey Jeff, can you read this job ad and tell me what you think, like from a veteran's perspective? What is, you know, is this good? Should I be putting more or less of this? How does this look? You know, and making the veterans who work there part of that process, right? It doesn't mean going over and constantly kind of interrupting, yeah, I know you got work to do, but come do my job, right? That's not what I'm talking about, obviously. It's about creating that team mentality, being like, hey, we really want to hire more veterans, and how does this, you know, what do you think about this? What do you think about this ad that I'm putting together? What do you think about the photo that I'm using for this? Do you think that makes a lot of sense? And making it a team effort. And it shouldn't just fall on you to hire veterans, right? The company wants to hire veterans, and so the company should be working together to make sure that we're hiring and retaining veteran talent. Right? Question here?
Okay, so I worked with service-connected veterans, provided income care services, and I'm a hiring manager. Now I'm in a completely different role. I'm an SSVF employment specialist.
Okay.
At Berkeley Food Housing Project.
Awesome.
And we've only had the grant money for a year. So this is like ground up beginning. I need help getting in front of employers because I have veterans that need jobs.
Yeah.
What do I do? And how do I partner?
So so you're working, if I just want to understand your question correctly, right? You're working as a veteran hiring specialist in an SSVF program, and you're looking to connect with employers who might be hiring veterans. Okay? Should I go into that now, or is that something we should wait for the roundtable for? Okay, yeah, let's cover that in a roundtable because that's really kind of specific.
Okay.
And we'll definitely get that into our roundtable once we bring the broadcast online.
Okay.
More reason to be here in person. Just remember that. All right, we had another question?
Yes, I'm curious to hear about how you guys, well, it seems like you have a sort of vetting process when you're placing veterans with certain employers or job training programs or trying to match people. How do you guys go about that? Like how do you weed through what maybe shouldn't be there, what should be there?
Oh, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. The question really was about how do we, select the veterans that we're going to send to, say, PG&E for their training course. How do we know what vets to send where, right? Is that basics of your question? Well, we get to know our veterans. When the veterans come in to talk to us, it's not just all right, we've got this security job position open. We find out what are the needs of the veterans who come to us. What are your needs? What are your passions? What do you want to be doing, right? What kind of qualifications do you have now? What kind of training would you need to get to where you want to be? And working with that veteran on what they want to do, so that we're not just saying, oh yeah, you got to take this job because that's what we have right now, right? And maybe some veterans do need that transitional employment, right? They need money now, right? And so they'll take a job that maybe isn't their career goal, but they're building toward that. And so we work with them on that plan. We create an employment plan for them so that we can see where they want to be 5 years out from now and help them to walk that path and get there. And the job that we take today might not be the job that they want in 5 years. Maybe it is. Maybe they have that perfect education. We can slide them into working at Twitter or working at Intuit or working somewhere else, and we can get them into that exact job, and they already have everything they need, and they're on that career path. Maybe they need to work at another job for a few years and go to school. Maybe they need a training program. Maybe they need, but we're not going to find that out unless we have a conversation with that veteran. And we have to have a really good intake process that allows us to do that. So as we talk to them, as we get at what they want to do, what skills they're bringing, what they're passionate about, because really, the career that we want is something we're passionate about. I'm lucky as can be. I get to wake up every single day and help vets. Every single day of my life, that's what I get to do. And as a combat vet who's service-connected, I can't imagine a better job than waking up every single day, going to work, and helping veterans. I think it's awesome for me. That's my passion. That's what I love to do. So I don't wake up ever and go, oh, work today. I might wake up and go, it is so early. but I still want to go to work, right? I'm not much of a morning person, so that alarm clock goes off at 5 o'clock, I'm throwing it across the room. But once I step into the office, or once I step out in the field and I get to go do this, I get to help veterans get jobs, I get to help veterans get housing, I get to help veterans get benefits. What's better than that, right? Because I found my passion. We're not going to find that out from a veteran until we sit down and have that good conversation with them. So our intake isn't a 2-minute conversation. It's not fill out this form and have a seat. It's sitting down with the human being and figuring out, what are your goals? What are your visions? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to be doing in life, let alone in employment? Let's get you matched up with something that you really want to do, something that you're going to be passionate about, something you're going to be good at, because that's what you're going to want to stay doing. And that really is the intake process. And having an intake process that is more in-depth, that goes over some of that stuff, is a way that you can make sure then that, okay, you know, if I come to you, I'm not good with my hands, right? I don't want to do construction because the last time I even tried to put a dowel up in my closet, I put a hole through my finger with a drill. All right? I'm not the handyman dude. I'm not going to work on cars for you. Okay? I'm good at stuff like that. Well, hopefully I am. I'm hoping. But, you know, doing that sort of thing, that's what we're looking for, okay, is being able to find out what people are passionate, what they're good at, what they want to be doing. That intake part, you're not going to get that with a 2-minute survey. You're not going to get that to check the box stuff, right?
Jeff, can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
So employment and training here. How we basically approach the screening for employers is we really take on a dual customer service approach. So Jeff did a really good job at explaining how we treat the veteran as our customer, but we do the same exact thing with the employer. So we want to make sure that when we're partnering with an employer, we're getting to the nitty-gritty of not just what the job description is telling us on paper, but what are those things that you can't put on paper, but that you know that you're looking for. Have a very open conversation of what that is. What are the specifics? We all know that sometimes on a job description we can put 40 requirements, but you really just need 3. We talk about what those essential 3 are. And we're also very honest in saying we're not going to, if we don't have anybody who fits these qualifications, we're just not going to send anybody your way because we don't want to burn any bridges. So we're going to do that pre-screening to make sure that all of those skill sets and requirements, number 1, are being met by the veterans who we see. We meet one-on-one with them. We don't post job postings on boards. So when an employer partners with us, it really is a one-on-one personal connection. We don't, in our lobby, veterans can't come in and say, oh, Union Bank is looking for a teller. That's not the way it works. Each job developer has a list of veterans who are working with one-on-one the way Jeff described. And so when an employer says, I'm looking for an accountant, that job description gets funneled down to all 4 of our job developers, and they start looking at a list of veterans who they've been working with to see who would be a good fit. And then they engage in that kind of conversation. So the pre-screening is being done from the day of the intake all the way to when we make those connections with employers.
I just want to reiterate for our online audience something that was brought up there, this idea of the dual customer service, which I'm really glad. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't cover that. Which at Swords to Plowshares, employment training for us is about customer service, right? What we do is about customer service in all aspects of what we're doing. But the veterans, and I talked a lot about the veterans as our customers, but so too are our employers, right? Our employers are also customers in that, and so thank you very much for pointing that out. That was we'll try and add that. So if we've got another question online, if not, we're going to wrap up the broadcast section for today. I really want to thank everybody online for joining us. I hope it was informative. Please fill out the survey that you'll get from this so that we can get some feedback and make sure we're, at Swords of Plowshares, we're always looking to improve what we do. So please fill out the survey and help us improve this training and make sure that we're really covering the needs that you have. You'll be getting that in about an hour. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. Next time, hopefully you can join us in person and then become part of our roundtable that we're about to have as the broadcast ends. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.